might be joining as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep this nice and simple and, make it an easy flowing thing for everyone. So I didn't invite everybody from the KM side.
Just mute yourself.
Troy will let us know when we're all set to go.
Yep, people are joining now, so we'll just give it a minute or so for people to join.
Close my office door. Yes, I actually have a door on my office now that has a handle on it. We just moved in.
There you go.
Just moved into a new house, Ron. So welcome, everybody. I'm Rick Sterling from Western IM, and many of you have always or have been on our IMCanadaConnect presentations before. I just wanted to say today, thank you all for joining. Really appreciate that. A little quick summary of IMCanadaConnect for those of you that haven't been on here before. When COVID happened to all of us, ARMA people, our RIM people in Canada, we decided that we needed to keep our RIM community strong. So we decided to put together a kind of a national, compose a national presence for all of us. And we called that IMCanadaConnect. And what that boils down to is each chapter in the country puts forward a presentation, and that the kind of all those presentations together give us basically a whole year of content, Canadian content. And so today's presentation is the Toronto chapter's presentation, put on by the lovely and talented Sarah Kelly, the chapter president from ARMA chapter president from Toronto. And Raheem will be doing the presentation today, and Sarah will be doing that introduction. So just a quick thing, I'll get away now and let Sarah introduce Raheem, but please tell everybody about IMCanadaConnect. The IMCanadaConnect website can be gotten to from our westernim.com website location. To get to that, and we will put the recorded version of the presentation today into our usual IMCanadaConnect location. So thank you again, and I'll just get off the session now. Before I do that though, Troy Sawyer, you'll see on the top of your screen. Troy is my partner at Western IM, one of my partners, and he will be there monitoring and doing what he always does to help us get the IMCanadaConnect pieces together for our national program. So thanks again.
Welcome, everybody.
That's it. I'm going away now. Sarah, take it away.
Thank you, Rick. As Rick mentioned, my name is Sarah Kelly. I'm the ARMA Toronto chapter president. And I'm really excited to announce our speaker today, who's very gratefully given us his time and expertise here. We have Raheem Ismail, electronics engineering technology, and he's a national team lead. Business solutions consultant with over 25 years of experience in information management across all types of industries and client sizes from SMB to enterprise level. Raheem advises clients on digital transformation through operational understanding to bridge today's vision into tomorrow's reality, involving transformation of business processes into intelligent automation with improved production, cost savings, and optimized business processes. Raheem is change management professional with Konica Minolta Business Solutions, and we're really lucky to have him here today. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Raheem.
Thank you very much. I feel like I should be getting an Oscar now or something walking up the stage. That was very nice. Thank you. So I'm going to share out my screen to everybody, and let's begin with this presentation, shall we? Wonderful. So first and foremost, thank you, Sarah, for the introduction, and thank you for allowing me this time. Rick and team, thank you very much for hosting and then making this a smooth and very simple process for us. You know, we've looked at many different ways over the last few months between myself and Sarah and Rick to, you know, how can we bring something that brings benefit to all of you? So to all of you, thank you for attending. And hopefully there's points in here where, you know, you have some thoughts that say, okay, well, that makes sense, or we might need to do a little bit more understanding of this piece or that piece. With me as two of my trusted allies is Ron Webb, who over the years has become very, very strong in terms of understanding how the digitization works and the world that lives in. So I wanted to bring him on board as well, just to, you know, as a secondary point of view for a lot of that's going to be happening. How's the day going to look today? So let's just move down to order of business. From an order of business, at the end of the day, comes down to an introduction, very simple, a little bit more explanation from what Sarah brought through. Digital transformation, just give you a little bit of a update about that. And then the 5 W's of digitization. One of the most important things is to understand the 5 W's. If you can do that about any topic, especially digitization, it's going to give you a better path moving forward. I'll also provide you with a sample digitization process, just a little bit of an outline, overview of how things would look when you're going through the process itself, and then we'll open up the questions and answers. All right. Who am I? Raheem Ismail. Today, I'm going to be your advisor. I'm going to be your guide. I'm going to help you understand how it is that we can go through this process called digitization. What do I bring to the table? 30 years of experience, 8 years or so as a solutions consultant with Konica Minolta. Konica Minolta says, in case you're not aware, is a 150-year-old global company, basically around every continent. We're an information management, hardware, and software specialists. From my point of view, being the national team lead for the services and solutions sales executives, our goal is basically consultancies in terms of digital transformations, which includes the first step in most cases is digitization. For myself, I've taken this transformation to another level. And personally, I've done a healthy living transformation over the last few years, you know, going in and realizing that, you know, sometimes the food that you eat is not always the best for you. So part of my guidance is not just from a business acumen standpoint, but from a personal acumen standpoint. I'm allowing myself to transform into a healthy living, into a healthy lifestyle in the midst of being able to lose, you know, 60+ pounds as well. So it's not just something that you look at from a transformation from a business standpoint, but you know, and in a personal standpoint, there's also a lot in there as well. Organization types. Over the years, I've worked with small to medium. I've worked with mid-market, large enterprise. I've worked with all types of enterprise customers. I've worked with all types of organizations and clients. That's allowed me to gain a wealth of experience and knowledge, not just about digitization, not just about digital transformation, but about how customers, how their environments are, their operating reality is my #1 goal. As you can see, the different industry types, covering all types of industries that we have today. Digital transformation. Let me just simplify this in a few words. The importance behind a digital transformation, and step 1 is always looking at digitization, is because we need to have organizations that can embrace digital transformation. They will see the benefits of a competitive advantage. Some of those competitive advantages are an increased customer experience, enhanced process efficiencies, improved decision-making, better agility and innovation. Why is this such an important piece? Especially now that COVID's arrived, we've gone through it, the whole world's lived through it. We've realized that there's so many more parts in the business that we were not prepared for. The digital transformation ensures that your business will always be prepared should COVID come up, should another area like that happen. When we look at digital transformation, 3 or 4 very important pieces that we want to look at is ensuring that the customer experience is enhanced, ensuring that you have an improved operational efficiency. We want to make sure that our clients can stay competitive, and very importantly, driving innovation. Because without innovation, the future is not as strong as it looks. As a little side note, top 3 drivers for digital transformation, as you can see on your screen right now. When you're looking at the points and the percentages, always remember that each client, each customer, each organization has their own requirements. These numbers represent what the average looks like. So if you're not in that area right now, do not worry, you will be there. The 5 W's, probably the most important part of what we do today and why we're all here today. So let me start being that advisor in all things digitization with the 5 W's. Why digitize? Because let's be honest, you have no choice today. An example that I bring up to all my clients is going back many years ago. Some of you might remember a company called Blockbuster. Many of you might not. But everybody knows who Rogers is. And that's the difference between digitization and not digitizing. Because if you digitize, you have the ability to move forward and move your business forward. When is the right time to digitize? It's not just about when is the right time, because it's any time is the right time. The most important part about when is, how is your organization looking? Do you have an idea, a plan to digitally transform your business? What needs to be digitized? This is probably one of the biggest questions that's always asked. What do I need to digitize? At the end of the day, it's not about just what, but it also ties into why, right? What do we need to digitize? Obviously, we have a whole bunch of documentation. We have records that need to be done. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at active versus non-active, when you're looking at the understanding of what is it that we really need to do, that's where I'm going to show you today some of the details about that. Who needs to digitize? Everyone. And I'll expand on that as well as we come up. And where should we digitize? This is probably a customer's first thought. They realize that they have stuff that they need to digitize, and then they're like, okay, where should we digitize? Should we do it in-house? Should we do it outside? Let me help you with some of these answers. The 5 W's are probably the most important part and aspect of any time, of any project, of anywhere that you want to look at for digitization. Okay. Let's start off with why. Access content with ease from anywhere. Bottom line, that's your most basic principle as to why. When we looked at people going through COVID, and as you can see on the bottom left corner of your screen, 65% of organizations saw an increased digitization due to COVID. Just think about that. When COVID hit, everybody had to start working from home. The biggest problem was 85% to 90% of all the companies that were part of this business acumen was with paper, and they had a problem. They needed to have a solution. Digitizing is that solution to that problem. Many organizations choose to scan analog records in order to save physical space. Everyone knows when you're in a business, you want to be able to be agile. When you want to be agile, it doesn't help when you have a whole storage room full of paper and documents. Removing that, digitizing that allows you to free up some of that much needed space. So you become more of a stronger company moving forward. There was an ISO that came out, and one of the big things that it came out with was, why are we digitizing and what is important about it? The most important part about it is to make sure that we have an authoritative record as one that has authenticity, reliability, integrity, and usability. What does that mean? That means that we need to make sure that when we're digitizing something, we need to be able to have it available to us from a legal standpoint, as well from a user standpoint. We need to be able to have our employees, we need to be able to have the executives leadership. We need to have access to documents that are no longer paper, because we need to ensure that we're always going to have the ability to see things without having to be in the office. We need to have information at our fingertips at all times nowadays. And that is becoming a bigger and bigger parcel of why we need to digitize. There's a lot of ideas when we look at what is the reasoning as to why. As you can see on your screen right now, the goal must remain to create digital records that are legally admissible, accessible, and authoritative. Those are the three fundamental pillars of why we're digitizing. If you look on your screen on the bottom right corner, you'll see that 86% of all employees say that they usually experience difficulty searching for files. When you're in a digitized world and your files are also in that digitized world, you now have the ability to readily and easily look up information in documents with just a single click. You don't need to go and find things. Things are found by you easily. When is the right time? Before you embark on a digital transformation, you need to guarantee that your personnel is properly taught and prepared to handle it. Just think about that for a quick second. Everybody wants to go out there and say, okay, you know what, I can take this piece of paper, I can digitize it, and everything is going to be fine. But the one thing that a lot of people don't realize is you're doing a change in the way that everybody works on a day-to-day basis. You need to ensure that your user population are able to understand how it is that digitization is going to be benefiting to them, but more importantly, how are they going to access that information? How does that work? What does that do? We have three main steps from a digitization process: converting the paper, capturing the information, and then digitally storing it. If the user population is not aware of these three steps and how they work, being able to retrieve the files, search the files, will become a little bit more of a higher mountain for them. That change management, that process becomes very, very important. A lot of times clients say, we just want to digitize files because we want to have a backup. We're not sure if we can do this today or tomorrow, but we just want to have something available for us. But in reality, if you do a digital backup, these are the same things as having a filing cabinet. Everybody can just put files in whenever they want. In our case, in this world today, we need to make sure that organizations can extract that critical information. The only way that happens is to utilize it for retrieval, for business decisions, and for gaining operational insights. So the question comes down to when. When your organization is ready to embark on this process and to digitize, it means that your employees, your user population is ready to understand and being taught and properly aware of how to search and retrieve your files. To look at something like 6 months from now, you start digitizing, you're like, this didn't go the way we wanted to. It comes down to understanding three parts or three markers: user management, operational management, and business management. So from a user management, you're looking at employee preparation. From an operational management, you're looking at, are we moving too fast? Are we just taking everything and just automatically putting it into a scanner, giving it to someone to say, you know what, we just need to transfer this over and we're good to go? From business management, one of the biggest pieces of a digitization road plan is to ensure that the employees understand why we're doing this and understand how it benefits them. It could be as simple, and some customers I've talked to, it is as simple as saying, you know what, If I can get you to digitize your files, you don't have to work extra hours before or after. You know, you have that life work balance back again. What needs to be digitized? When we're looking at something from a what, it comes down to how do we look at that, right? There's multiple areas that we think of, that we understand, that we know. But at the end of the day, one of the most important pieces of our being today is not just about what we're looking at, but we're also trying to understand what are the options available to us, right? If you have the ability to understand what the options are in front of you, then you have the ability to say what needs to be digitized. So let's take a look at some of those options. We have 4 of them, right? We have a complete black file, we have partial black file, day forward, and then day forward with on demand. What does that all mean? Well, it just basically means that, are we going to take everything from our closet, from our room, and just digitize everything? Or are we going to do a certain amount of documents? Are we going to look at, okay, we're going to not put all that stuff away because all that documentation that's in that room today might be much older than expected. Maybe we just start capturing documents moving forward. Sort of like a grandfathering of the documents. Or is it better just, you know what, we're going to capture everything that we need moving forward, and that room of all those documents, when we need them, that's when we'll go and get them converted. When we look at what needs to be digitized, now that we understand, you know, the options that are available, there's archive, there's active, and there's hybrid. When we're looking at the archive part of things, that's where you're looking at from a complete back file, right? It's stuff that we no longer require, but we need to keep it available. Let's go ahead and do that. If we look at active, a lot of times when we're looking at the active, clients will look at a point and say, you know what, we'll use a day forward with on-demand option, mainly because we're working on a document today, it's active, so let's get that scanned and let's get that digitized. But then we might need some information from a previous document or a previous file that's inactive today. That's when we can use that day forward piece. When we're looking at a hybrid, a very important part about the hybrid is being able to mix the two together, but that also comes down to helping the users understand what exactly it is that we need to digitize, because the users are going to be on that point every single day. The easiest way for us to get around that is to understand, do we go in and say from this date forward, we're going to digitize, or is it more beneficial from this date backwards to digitize? One other thing to remember, and very important to think about, is size. Because when we're looking at what needs to be digitized, we need to also think about, we have a whole storage room today, and we have countless number of inactive and active files. When we're looking at the storage part of it, do we want to just put it into a standard network folder? Do we want to put it into SharePoint? When you look at the bottom of your screen right now, you can see that an average of 15,000 plus scanned images is roughly a gigabyte. A lot of records that come through, you know, looking at an Excel file type, especially for the accounting times, you know, you look at it and you see that you can get 165,000 images per gigabyte. These little nuances and understandings are very important, because that helps you understand what needs to be digitized, because it's going to relate back to the amount of space that you're going to require, and space in the digital world is a very leveled cost, a lot lower than it is to have actual real estate, but there is still a cost, and that needs to be brought into what needs to be digitized. Who needs to digitize? When I was writing this presentation and creating it for everyone, one of the things that I was thinking about was, what's the easiest way to help me explain and help me bring some understanding to everyone? So let's put it this way. Anyone that uses a digital phone, call it a mobile phone today, or anyone that has a smartphone, you're a person that needs to have digitized work. Why? Because the world is so strong when it comes to having technology in their hands. They need everything at their fingertips. If you want to go to watch a game in downtown, first thing you're going to do is look up on your phone. If you want to go fly to a different resort, you want to go on a vacation, you want to go on a holiday, you're going to use your phone. So why do we not have that phone capability to get our documents that we want? That's why it's so important for everyone to have the ability and the requirement to digitize. We're not in a world, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 4 years ago. We're in a post-COVID world where hybrid, agile workers are plenty. And every company is now looking at, being in the office maybe 1 day, 2 days, maybe 3 days a week. What do you do for the days that you're not in the office? How do you get your documents that you need? That's why digitization is required by everyone. I brought up a list of some thoughts of who might need to digitize. And then I said to myself, I said, if I just get you to just think about it and say, select 2 options. If you selected 2 options, then you need to digitize. But then I realized, even if it's just one of those, right? If it's to reduce costs, if it's risk mitigation, if you want to make sure that you have disaster recovery, that is important enough in today's business that you're trying to move ahead and move forward. It is very important that everyone has ability and everyone should go through digitization. There really isn't a reason not to digitize anymore. The world is already at that point where everything is available online. We don't want to be the ones that are left behind when the next phase of digital neighborhoods come in. Where should I digitize? So the thought process is, in many thoughts, I looked at what makes the most sense. What is it that when I sit down with a customer and customers come to me and say, where should I do this? Probably one of the biggest questions that are asked is it in-house or is it external? And there's a couple of things to remember. First and foremost, if you look at the first section, it's the skills from the staff. You need to ensure that if you're going to do this internally, you have the resources, the personnel, and the understanding and the know-how, how to make sure and ensure that you're meeting the specifications of a digital file. Remember, going back to the beginning that we were talking about, there's certain caveats that you need to have in terms of how a digital file can just be brought forth. We can't just take a piece of paper, scan it. Those days are gone. Today, to be able to get ahead in the world, to be able to make our business more viable as we move forward, we need to ensure that if we're going to do an internal digitization, first, there's time that you're going to need. Second, there's resources and personnel that will have to be able to understand what they're going to do. As a quick side note, I was talking to a customer, and they invited me in just to have a discussion with their executive leadership. And they had already started some digitization. They asked me if I can just go take a look at it. When I went to look at it, truthfully, I was a little bit horrified. They had some temps that were there, and no one had told these temporary people that what they needed to do. They were just told, go in the room, take the files and put them in the scanner and scan them. They were missing documents. They had documents that were upside down. They had documents that were, still left behind. And I told the executive team, I go, you need to stop now. You need to just take a step back to allow yourself to move 2 steps forward. Why is this so important? Because if you're digitizing something and you're not sure of the process, you're not sure of the requirements, you're just going to be behind yourself when you go to get that file or when you go to retrieve that file. Something that's very important is when you're looking at digitization externally and internally. On the screen right now, as you can see, there's a few certificates, a few thoughts to ensure that the standards are met. electronic images as documentary evidence. Just think of that for a quick second. Today, you have a piece of paper. If it needs to be used for evidence, take the piece of paper in. Tomorrow, that piece of paper is gone. Now you have the actual digital file of that piece of paper. We need to ensure that is legible. We need to be able to ensure that people can find what they need, right? Looking at other areas, whether it's HIPAA or it's PIPEDA, we need to ensure that the documents, where you're going to get them digitized, whether in-house or external, the teams have the ability to meet these requirements. These are not just requirements across the board, these are government requirements in terms of, I want to be able to use them for income tax purposes. I want to use them for client requirements. I want to use them for, as this says, evidence. There's multiple factors to understand where you need to digitize. It's not just about, we can do it very easily. It's very cheap for us to do it. It's lower cost. We have our own people, we can do it. The thought is, where shouldn't just be about who's doing it? It should be about how it's going to be done. And how is it going to be done is by ensuring that people that you're working with, if it's an external team, they understand what you're seeing on the screen today. If it's an internal team, you need to ensure that you've outlined the clear roles, the responsibilities. You've defined the ways that the reporting structure occurs. You need to ensure that the communication. Now, this is not just communication between people that are doing the process. This is communication between all levels of users. So you have the team that's doing all the digitization, but you need to also communicate with the team that's providing them the documents that have to be digitized. You need to have communication with the team that's going to be searching and retrieving these documents after they're digitized. We need to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Is there an easy answer for where? No, there isn't. But there is one answer that's very easy. Once you've understood the digitization requirements, once you've seen what it is, the benefits that you're going to have, you have the ability to do both. You have the ability to have some of it in-house and some of it outside. There isn't going to be a moment where you're going to stand there and say, yes, we decided to go outside to get it done, and we need some of these files. There's a lot of functionality available to be a collaborative kind of process as to where. The clients today have the ability, when I'm sitting down and talking to them, and we're designing an idea of digitization for their whole organization. And the question comes up always about where. At the end of the day, it comes down to, where are you able to meet the demand, and how easily can you meet the demand? As I'm just about to finish up, I wanted to bring everybody a bit of a digitization process. Just a nice, simple sample, right? This is what you're seeing today is a very high level outline of an actual digitization process that we carry. And part of that digitization process, as you can see, starts out with scanning preparation. And then if you look a little bit further down, you can see the scanning preparation includes a lot of clients that I sit down and speak to, a lot of organizations that I speak to. They do not realize when they want to take a file and digitize it. You want to take a file today and you want to scan it to your email, perfectly fine. But when you want to digitize files, you need to understand there's a very large preparation required before you actually take the piece of paper and you put it into a scanner to get scanned. Some of the more important areas, and from my 25, 30 years in the information management area, I've seen a lot. One of the biggest things to remember when you're scanning is unfolding paper and removing paper clips or staples. Those are probably the 2 or 3 most important parts of getting a proper scan. A lot of clients don't realize it because they see a package of paper, they take it out of the file folder and they just go to scan it. And then afterwards, they're spending more time looking at why a document was missed, or unjamming the document feeder when they could have spent half that time before they started scanning. The next thing to remember is scanning. There's different ways of scanning, but quality assurance is probably one of the most important aspects of ensuring that your digitization process is aligned properly. Quality not only looks at what was scanned is a true representation of the actual document, but what was scanned, is it actually legible? Is it actually able to be used for other areas? Can we extract information off of it that we wanted to? Looking at indexing quality control. A lot of you today in the records management might look at indexing, might understand it as tagging. It might be included as high-level information. That is the information that we want to lift or capture from the scanned document to ensure that we have continuity downstream into other areas. OCRing, optical character recognition. This becomes a very important fundamental part in the process. If you need to use the information that we're going to capture or lift from the documents, there's a very good chance you're going to need to OCR that information. So it becomes legible to digital lines down the flow. Next thing is, how do we receive the files back? How do you get the digital files? We can give them to you as a hard drive. There's options for uploading the documents. Something to think about at the beginning when we're talking about, when and where. We need to understand the final resting spot for all of our documents once they're digitized. A lot of clients come to me and ask me, I want to just put them on a network drive. When you put them on a network drive, yes, you have a digital file. If you have no organization to your folder structure, you might as well just leave them back as a piece of paper, right? So important to think about that. And then finally, a couple more pieces. If you need to scan your documents, always remember, never scan and destroy. Scan, review, confirm, destroy. Always keeps your processes and your documents in the right areas. And the final disposition, once you're ready, you've done that review, and you've confirmed everything, you've validated all the data is correct, then you can do a final disposition. And it needs to be ensure that it's not just a matter of taking it and throwing it out into the recycling bin. Remember, the data that's on your document is extremely intelligent for not yourself, but for anyone else that might get access to it. There's also a lot of different regulations in terms of who's allowed to see that data after it's gone. Privacy concerns, security concerns. So when you're finished your scanning process, ensure that your destruct level of your documents is at par with your whole process. Because once you miss that one final step, it might be the last thing that people think about. It should, at the end of the day, be one of the first things you think about. What are we going to do when the documents are scanned? Okay. And from my point of view, I would like to say thank you for this presentation time. And I would love to take some questions, some answers. We have a host of people that can sit down and have a nice little discussion. Any questions or any concerns, any comments, please at any time. I will stop sharing now and hand it over back to Troy and Rick.
I haven't seen anything in the chat. I know in a past webinar, we had a setting not set correct that it was allowing users not to type in chat. So if that's the case, I think you can still use the Q&A for people that might have questions. So if you want to try to submit something through Q&A, you can do that as well, if nothing's coming in chat.
Yeah, I had a question, Raheem. I should preface that question with the fact that across the country over the last, 3 months, I'm getting more people asking about digitization of documents than I have in the last probably 15 years. Yeah. So 20 years ago or 25 years ago, when I started in this side of the business, everybody said we should just scan it all. I got that daily almost. And
Yeah.
then everything slowed down and nobody was really talking about paper that much anymore. Everybody's talking about electronic. And now all of a sudden after COVID, everybody's going, we should deal with this scanning stuff. We should get this scanned. So have you seen that yourself across the country now? Have you seen that kind of upswing in the people wanting to deal with the capture side of things?
Absolutely, we have, especially the last, I would say, I would even go even down to, let's say, since last summer.
Okay.
And I think a lot of different things have touched on that. You know, the fact that a lot more businesses are looking at an agile workplace.
Right.
A year ago, they thought they might all come back. And now they're saying, you know what, maybe we'll sort of make it a bit easier, right? Make it a little bit of a hybrid situation. And then the other thing to remember, and a lot of clients don't realize this, is 3-4 years ago, there wasn't really an urgency, right? No one was thinking about, like, you know what, I need this document when I'm away. People just think, I remember having a discussion with some of my clients, and they're like, yeah, but you know, if I'm on vacation, I want to approve a document. I want to look at something. I have it, you know, that's all I want to do it. Today, your business can't run without having that document in front of you.
No, there was
Right.
a whole lot of
Everybody
scan on demand happening for sure over the course of COVID.
You know, the one little caveat that happened 4 years ago that's not really mentioned anymore is it took me 30 years to get all this paper together, right? And now all of a sudden I want to try and get it digitized in one day, right? So you can see the benefits that people 4 years ago were thinking, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. Today they're realizing they have that benefit to say, we need to start digitizing this.
Right.
I've got a couple of questions too, Rick, if you.
Sure. Go ahead, Troy.
So I know one of the things probably on everybody's mind, and it comes up as soon as people kind of start down this road, is equipment. So kind of just from a standpoint of whether you're getting somebody else to do it or you're trying to do it in-house, what is the equipment kind of involved in doing this? Because often you hear, like going into a project, we had somebody say, well, we've got our internal, you know, multifunction devices that we think can handle the volume that we have. And it's like, well, maybe not. And then I've had it to the other extreme where it's like, you know, hey, the camera on my phone is 10 times more powerful than that $10,000 scanner. Why am I buying a $10,000 scanner when the resolution for my camera on my phone is better? So can you talk a little bit around the equipment? Sure,
I can. So let me touch base first on something that you just brought up that is a very important piece: resolution. So based on international standards for an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, you do not require higher than 300 DPI, which is 300 dots per inch. Why is that? Because on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, if you go to 400, 600, you're not going to be able to pick up spots that are bigger than that, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is when it comes to scanning and the hardware you require, it comes down to one big thing: the volume you need to do. So yes, you know what, you do have the ability to say, you know, I have these 2 or 3 boxes I want to scan. Sure, use my MFD, right? My multifunction device. But when you're looking at 30, 40, 60, 100 boxes, more than that, then you want to start looking at actual scanners, right? And there's a whole host of clients, you know, companies out there that manufacture scanners. But one question I always get asked is, do I want a 110-page scanner or do I want a 50-page scanner? Again, how much volume are you going to be going through? And how important is the documents? Because if you're going to go through a 110-page a minute scanner, you're going to go through a lot more volume, but you're also going to need someone on the other side to receive it that fast. There's no more bottlenecks, right? That's a very good question, though. A lot of clients look at different scanners. I've actually had a couple of clients that have gone out and said, you know what, we're going to test it internally. And they've gone out and just bought, you know, a very low cost production scanner, very, very low cost, under like $1,000. And they ran it and they realized, you know what, it didn't meet all of their needs, but it met some of their departmental needs, right? So they're able to move it to a department that had small amounts of paper And then for the organization as a whole, they got production scanners.
I think that's a good point too, on the side of equipment aligning with the process you're putting in place to do that,
Absolutely.
right?
Very, very
Is it
important.
active? Is it back scanning? Is it day forward? All that kind of stuff should play into account for sure.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Then you just mentioned the DPI and kind of what standard we should be scanning at. You mentioned 15 files per gig. Is that 300 DPI? 'Cause I think it
Yeah.
would be a little bit more
It's
than that.
15,000 images per roughly a gigabyte,
Okay.
depending
Okay.
on the different classification of the document, how much information there is actually on the document, so on and so forth. But sitting at about a 300 DPI level at a black and white color format, is around that number.
Okay, I got a question coming in the QA here from Pat. Just a comment, OCR is something that needs to be looked at carefully. Scanning documents in a folder with 300 or 200, 300 pages can be problematic, slow things down, and often searching is hindered as the search parameters are usually vague. And you should have to be strategic to OCR. We OCR the labels of folders and can map the functional areas with the assistance of a quality assurance process. So talking a little bit around the OCR functionality. I had a question around the kind of OCR too, that lines up this as well, as how useful it is to do OCR on content that is possible. One of processes we often come up to is what systems we put into and how can we access these documents. And if you're able to OCR and then have your system of destination be able to provide index and searching for content, definitely lean towards the OCR for retrieval and search functionality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great question, great comment, because one thing to remember is you can OCR the whole document, and we call that searchable, just as everybody else goes through that searchable PDF. And the one thing to remember is you might not need to identify with different tags or different index fields for the whole document, but if you get the pivotal information of that document, now your user can access the document and they can do a full search inside the document for the information they want, right? And that's where the OCR functionality comes in. It not only helps you look at the index fields and validate them, it's so much more it can do for that data it's pulled out. It becomes such an intelligent part of the whole process.
Yeah, for sure. So now that we kind of have the documents indexed or scanned and indexed, and we've decided to store it, as part of that whole process, I'm sure you run into a lot. It's like, okay, now that we have the digital records, we have it in SharePoint or OpenText or whatever it might be in. One of the processes we talked about, the destruction of the records afterwards, but one of the things I think that is overlooked in a lot of cases is the complete source or the destination of records. And what I've seen happen once before, it was only to a shared drive, so it wasn't a full EDRMS system or anything like that, but scanning was done, drive died, documents were already destroyed, and the disaster recovery on the shared drive was not validated, and content was lost, completely lost. Physical had been destroyed. They validated the content on the shared drive, but did not validate the process of actually the backup and data recovery of that drive. So just a heads up, you got to make sure the whole ecosystem of this
validation, validation, and then looking through it.
Yeah,
absolutely. One thing that I've always told my clients is, let's just say you're scanning everything. The software today on the scanner, independent of the scanner, has so much functionality that it can actually send to different places at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not actually even having to go in and pay an extra amount to say, I need to back up all of this data I just scanned. When you're actually in the scanning process, just split in two and say, you know what, one copy goes here, one copy goes there. Right? Totally makes sense. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of clients are going to go there. Yes.
What have you seen for, in the day, we always talked about indexing as, every client's different, of course, but kind of a standard was 3 to 4 fields per document was a kind of a pull it out of the air kind of a standard. Is that still the case? Has that changed much?
I haven't seen too much of a change. Just going by some of the organizations I've talked to, and if Ron can even add a couple of pearls of wisdom there. To me, the minimum you need is at least 3,
Right.
because you want to make sure that you have the ability to validate against naming convention.
Yeah.
Some clients want to go to 10 or 12. But obviously that's the EDRMS in the back end that wants to receive it.
Yeah.
So to me, someplace around the 3 to 5 mark is a good spot to stop. Ron, what would you say? What do you think, sir?
Well, I think your indexing is really predicated by your workflows and what's happening with your environment for tracking your content. So when you're setting up your indexing, we try to incorporate an indexing that's already understood by the work environment. So the adoption rate of a digital environment is easier for them to latch onto. If you're going to implement a brand new taxonomy for your files, then that will also increase the learning curve for your workers. So we try to keep the indexing, working with our clients, as something that's relevant to the business that they can adopt and use for currently what's in place, ideally for their physical files. We replicate that in the electronic file as well. Now, with that said, that may not be possible depending on what type of system they're going into. If it's SharePoint or other systems, then we may have to set up the indexing schema to match their file formats to be able to load into the identified repository.
Sure.
But for the most part, we try to keep it simple for the work environment so they can adopt it much easier.
Let me ask you, if the rest of the people on the session here, I've been noticing, because of COVID, likely a lot of those kind of people that had been continuing to work in organizations, the subject matter experts that we always use to get that information from, they're gone. Like they just pulled the pin somewhere along the line because they had their time and they just went, I'm not doing this anymore, and they're gone. And I've started, and the wheels don't always fall off the wagon really fast in those situations. It's kind of over time, people go, oh, wait a second, what do we do here? Fred used to do that, or Mary used to do that, and she's not here anymore. And so now I'm starting to see some of those things come up, but we don't have the subject matter expert kind of wealth that we had prior to COVID, actually. Have you been noticing some of that as well?
Seeing that more and more. But one thing to remember, though, the reason that's been predicated out a little bit is because the software, and this is called SharePoint as it is, right? SharePoint comes basically free with any Office 365 system. The thing that SharePoint does is it's trying and starving to be able to organize a business, any organization. So in the past, you need to have a specialist that would sit there and say, you know what, I know how this has to be set up, and go forward, right? Gives you the different levels of indexing and all this other stuff that you need. SharePoint does it for you now. But you tell them the kind of documents that you want, it already has stuff built into it to say, if it's this kind of record, I need this kind of information. Create it, right? And a lot of EDRMSs that are coming to fruition now, they're sort of running at that same level, because they know it's the software is becoming so intelligent that it knows if you're going to have this type of record, this is the kind of high level information or index field that you want to make use across the board. Right?
Yeah, I think though we have seen, all of us have seen that situation where people have gone and rolled out SharePoint. IT's gone and rolled out SharePoint because they needed to have an electronic place to put things during COVID. And nobody planned it at all. It was just like here it is. We've got it for free anyway, so we're paying for it. We might as well use it kind of attitude. And we're looking at a lot of messy situations now where people have to go back and try and fix it. And as we know, fixing things is way more expensive than trying to plan it, do it right in the first place.
No, exactly. I think, and that was one of the things that I was hoping I got through to everyone during the presentation was that planning stage, right? Mm-hmm. You have to make sure that you just don't sit down. There's so many times that I'll talk to an organization and you'll have, someone that'll come by and say, okay, yeah, great. Come in, let's start digital transformation, let's start digitization. And then as we're about to start the process, IT will come by and say, okay, well, wait a minute, we're not ready, or someone else, another group will come by. And I think that's one of probably the biggest problems is not everybody in the organization was requested, if you will, to say, what is your thought on it, right? You can't have too many people all moving the ship, but you need to help everybody understand which direction you're going to move.
With a group full of records managers, they know that very well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think one of the things that comes up in the scanning and imaging capture side of things a lot too is that whole idea of estimation of how much we need to capture. I mean, obviously it does cost money to do a scanning project. I mean, there's no free lunch on that side of the house either. As the quality kind of capture people like Ron's organization and have been around for a while, they get it down to a science as to how to get that stuff done fast for the clients and keep the cost down. But there's also that kind of internal gauge of what do we scan? If we got a bunch of stuff that's almost up for disposition paper wise, maybe we don't need to scan it. Maybe we just let it run out and we get it shredded when the time comes. Do you go in and do a lot of that kind of gauging of what needs to go or what needs to be scanned and what isn't? Because a lot of times I find the clients don't really understand that process.
A lot of clients don't. You're absolutely correct. It's a very good point. A lot of clients, they just don't have any direction. Like that's one thing that they're really lost about. I remember I sat down with one of my with an education organization, and they came to me and helped me learn something. I never knew this. So if you're a student in any place in Ontario at any school, you need to have, and you go see a nurse. If you go see the nurse, that note has to be available for 35 years, no matter what. If the nurse gives you something, whatever it is, an Advil, that document now has to stay around for 100 years. So when you think about the ability of being able to sit down and talk to clients and helping them understand these processes, it's not about giving them the answer. It's about helping them think about more of the questions. So we have a lot of clients that come to us, and I go to Ron a lot about it. Should we have a timeline as to where we can say cut? This is how long we need to keep stuff. It's more about helping them get educated in what sort of looks like should be the realm of possibility, and then allows them to internally validate which documents now along and moving forward. Ron, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I was just going to add to that, Raheem. It's really important to understand that when you're looking at a digitization project, because organizations, a lot of these projects can be very large and be very encompassing. And it's really important to understand what documents you need to digitize that are your business drivers versus those that can sit. So just as an example, if you have a bunch of boxes offsite in storage and you're never accessing them, there's no point in digitizing those because there's not going to be an ROI on it. If you haven't looked at those boxes, they're offsite, they're costing you basically pennies to keep in storage, then those would be boxes and content that you don't necessarily need to look at. That stuff is taking care of itself. But what you really want to look at is the documentation that is really critical to your business, that's driving customer support, that's driving revenue generation, that's supporting your employees. Those are the documents that you're going to really notice the ROI on, and you should be focusing on those as your drivers when you're looking at a digitization project.
Right. Like vital records.
Yeah, and one of the ways that Raheem and I look at projects is as an organization, if you're going to look at doing the whole organization, let's say, it's really important to start off and do a test site first. So let's say it's finance or another organization. We will do a smaller digitization project through an identified department. We can then go back to the organization and display, here's what we found, here's the finds we've had, here's the quality of the digitization process, here's the metadata required. You can then take that and use it as a roadmap to map out the rest of the department on how to go through that organization. But it's really important to identify a starting point that's relevant, but it's not going to be It's relevant and it's critical, but it's not mission critical to the business. So it gives you a starting point, also mitigates your risk a little bit as well. So
Yeah,
Thanks,
I know
Ron.
I know we're running low on time, but just really quickly is just to add, some clients have done that internally themselves as well, right? And then they've come and asked us for our insights. So it doesn't matter if you do it from outside or inside. The idea is that you at least try and run that sampling to get a better understanding of what you have, right? I know it's 3:01 now, so we have gone over time.
Yeah, well, thanks. I should thank everybody for attending today. This is always a fascinating topic, especially with professionals that are working in that side of the business all the time, like Raheem and Ron. So appreciate both of you being on today.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending the IMCanadaConnect presentation. Thanks, Sarah, for bringing forward this presentation from the Toronto chapter. And we have one more presentation for the ARMA year, which is happening next month on the 28th. And that is going to be the president of the Southwestern Ontario chapter is bringing that presentation forward and doing the presentation himself. So looking forward to hearing Hubert Kaczynski from Brantford actually do that presentation. The advertising stuff will be out right away. And it's more focused around the cleanup of documents in an organization, which is a hot topic these days as well. So looking forward to seeing all of you sign up for the next presentation as well. And thank you all so much for supporting our community across Canada, the RIM community across Canada. And I'm looking forward to trying to get everybody together in the summer to talk about our next year's program in the ARMA world and see if we can put our program together in a little more faster fashion next year than we did this year after we've been used to the process. So thanks again. Everybody have a great rest of your week and look forward to seeing you on the next IMCanadaConnect presentation.
Thank you, everybody.
thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye, everybody.